Good morning. Welcome to another webinar hosted by New City Press and Living City Magazine. My name is Greg Metzger, a part of the team at New City Press, and we're excited to be doing this webinar on small businesses in a time of pandemic. And in order to help us with that, we actually have a third co-sponsoring group today, and that is the Economy of Community in North America. EOC North America will be helping guide us through this discussion. And so we're excited to get started with that. Just a word about the process. As you're listening, we hope that you'll have questions and that you'll share questions with us. In order to do that, you'll just scroll down to the bottom with your cursor toward the bottom of the page. And what should pop up is a number of Zoom options, including the Q&A box. So right there, you can enter any questions you have. And after the panelists have presented, Suzanne Jansen, editor-in-chief of Living City Magazine, will guide us into a time of question and answer. So without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Jon Hokama. Jon is the coordinator of the EOC North America. And in addition to that, he's the president of Jon Hokama and Associates, which is a coaching firm that uses Enneagram-based principles to help companies think through and strategize and more effectively work as a business. So Jon, I'm going to hand it over to you and looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Greg. It's a pleasure to be a part of this webinar, and we appreciate your sponsorship and also Living City Magazine. And what we're going to do today is we will all kind of set a context for us in terms of what makes this particular situation that we're all facing very different from anything we've faced before. And then I'll facilitate a team of panelists who have just incredibly rich business experience and can speak to how best to cope with the pandemic we're facing. You know, one of the things that makes this so different for us is that we are part of something that everybody in the world is experiencing. I can't think of any phenomena in the last 100 years where we have had that. As our world has become more globalized, it's also become even more fragmented. But I think in a real sense, not only are we facing the same opportunities, but also the same challenges. And each of us responds to these challenges in a different kind of way. Let me illustrate it by some news I've gotten recently here in the city of Denver. April 30 is supposed to be a record high temperature for that day. Now, some folks think, oh, not a big deal. We're just going to have a hot April 30th. We're still in spring. Now, other folks are thinking about it and saying, wow, looks like summer's already here and we're on this glide path that'll take us straight into summer, and we're missing out on some of our spring. And yet other folks look at the same phenomena and say, oh my gosh, this is evidence of global warming. And in fact, we're all going to die. So as you can see, there are some very different responses that people have to a bit of news as trivial as a record high temperature. So in the same way, I think people are responding very differently to the pandemic, depending on who they are and where they sit. So in general, I have, the analogy I like to use is it's as though we're all in an airplane that's spiraling to the ground, and we're trying to figure out how to get our own mask on. But under these conditions, we don't even know what our mask is. And so let me suggest a couple things that comprise your mask in these COVID times. And this applies to all stakeholders. First of all, be authentic. I think one of the worst things is if we either try to suppress our anxiety and pretend it's not there, or if we are excessively happy and very positive to an excess of what the realities are. So whatever it is, I encourage you to explore whatever your authenticity is. Secondly, so that your authenticity doesn't go off the rails, I encourage a mindfulness practice of some sort. I'm sure you've seen in many articles and podcasts the importance of finding a way to stay grounded. And there's been shown both by research and by practical experience that there's no better way than to gain perspective by being mindful, taking time for meditation or contemplative prayer, whatever your practice is. This is a great time to deepen it or to begin it. Third thing I'd say is each one of us operates from a different body center. Some of us are more head-oriented, others more body-oriented, and others more mind-oriented. So depending on what your natural inclination is, you will have a particular way of coping with a crisis. But I want to encourage you to deepen your understanding and empathy for people who have a different orientation than yourself. Because each of the stakeholders that you interact with has a different orientation, just be mindful that they may be seeing and experiencing it very differently from yourself. And keep in check your own frustration when people are not, in quotes, acting rationally. I have some particular advice about putting on the mask for business owners in the audience and those listening afterwards. And this is based on years of experience in working with business owners. And it's simply this: your mask is to be your own best boss. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean simply that you want to treat yourself and model for your team best practices of self-care. Very simply, as you model these best practices, you will be actually helping all of your stakeholders to be their best selves and encouraging that. To give you an example of how this is done, let me share a story from one of our business owners in Spain. And he's a consulting civil engineer. And he talks about a time when, and as you know, Spain was facing really horrendous coronavirus impact. And he talked about a plane flight he took, and there were people coughing next to him. And he was feeling very distressed as he was on his way to a consulting engagement in another city. These are his words. He said, "I thought that surely the virus was there in the plane and I was not going to get rid of it. I panicked. The trip had been impudence. So I tried to accept that possible mistake and love the failure that could result. Probably God allowed the situation for some reason, and I discovered inside that I had to adopt the most intelligent attitude, to love the present moment. I was on that flight to love my client and the people with whom I had met on the construction site, helping them with my knowledge and experience to make their work as good as possible, and the bridge that they were building had adequate security and solidity." So here's the story of a business owner and how he, I think, practiced authenticity and awareness of the three types of intelligences, and also reflected a mindfulness practice. Now, to make this even more impactful, I want to turn the mic over to Nick Sanna, who's CEO of Risklands, and he's a man who's currently living and really understands the needs of CEOs and business owners. So thank you, Nick.
For your opening comments, and it was a great reflection already. What I can share is just my experience. I'm not sure I'm doing it. I'm living, up to standard that you have illustrated here, but it has definitely been a strong journey already, in the sense that this crisis has been unsettling from the beginning. I run a business with approximately 100 employees. We are in cybersecurity and have a big consulting arm, and half of our business is in person. All our customer delivery is done in person. So as the crisis hit, this it was a big interrogation on the future of this business. So what can it be? And it would have been very easy. And I have to admit, some moments I felt, that this was too much. Will there be a business here? What will happen to our business model? Can we recover from this? And it's easy to be trapped in that anxiety. And I realized very quickly that I had to ground myself, as you hinted, John, to one, be clear-headed, but also continue to conduct myself in the business in a way that is at the service of others and not just be paralyzed by the situations. And so I had to make a conscious decision to find a new routine and ground myself even more in some practices that I used to do on an ongoing basis, such as, taking time, in my case, I'm a Christian Catholic, meditate on the scripture and have moments of prayers of silence and entrusting everything I cannot control and also my actions to God, and in even more than I would have done usually. And that gave me a lot of peace and I would say mindfulness to be able to take every day and make the best of it. And so that starting of the day is so very important to see clear, and also to maintain my integrity, because the numbers were coming in and business was not happening, revenue is down, investors, telling you make the hard calls, cut costs right away and deep, no regrets. And me like, no, I need to keep myself, we wanted to do this business, and now our number one value in the business is put the other first. And so that moment in the morning to recenter myself on those value points was very important for me. And also gave me then the peace of mind to reach back to the advisors and see what alternatives do we have in terms of keeping the business afloat, and giving another day as we figure out a way to get out of the crisis. And so being able to explain, and brainstorm with people you trust, what are the options, and not just give in to the easy thing, which was maybe to lay off people and just cut yourself out of it. And believing there might be ingenuity and there might be creative ways to maybe reinvent the business in the process. And so I think that mindfulness in the moment gave me the peace to be able to challenge my investors as well, and explain what game we wanted to play, and open up with the employees in a way that engage them in responding to the situation and creatively thinking about what can we do to reposition ourselves in a way that is different but also new. And in our case, we're starting finding ways to deliver our services not only remotely, but also, given there was no money for many of our customers to give us in the short term, to provide some free service, to be at their service. And we've seen now, I would say, in a few weeks already some benefits of that in terms of goodwill created, a business that is starting to come back. But again, I credit that to that, those moments of mindfulness, collaboration, and being healthy myself to be able to healthily interact with the business, not succumb to depression, the anxiety, and then the ideas. And if you're authentic, as you said before, and you explain where you're coming from, what kind of game you want to play, you may get the 100-fold. And for me, it may be, I just got news 5 minutes before the call that we were approved for a small business loan, from small business administration loan from the government that will help us not to lay off people. It is already giving us ideas, because of this new interaction with the team for new products that actually are more pragmatic than the ones we had before. And I don't think that could have happened without that readiness, that state of mind, that openness to, one, being authentic, and that faithfulness to our ultimate missions, and that care that we want to have for one another in the business, as part of our culture code. So that I would say in a nutshell is what I wanted to share. And I think that we're going to come out of it probably stronger as a business in ways that I wouldn't have anticipated a few weeks ago. We had to react quickly. We did it. We then took care of one another, and everybody contributed and seeing what can we do to redirect our efforts. And now we want to think about rebounding for the future. And I don't think I could have done it if I just went the easy way of slashing cost, just pleasing investors, and not, I'd say, entrust myself in God, and then being open to finding new ways.
Gosh, thank you so much, Nick. That's, I think, a beautiful illustration of a different way of approaching what's normally sort of a knee-jerk reaction in business. Thank you. So Jim Funk, we'd like to turn to you now to talk a bit about the needs of employees, and really appreciate your work in the leadership area and your extensive work with both leaders and employees. So Jim, take it away.
Well, thank you, John, and hello, everyone. I'm going to say a few words about what employees need at a time like this and in a situation like this. My background is human resources, so I naturally go to the question of employees and the people in the organization. So I like to set the stage by first saying a few things about what jobs really are to people, what they mean to people. Many of us think of our jobs as more than just a way of earning a living. We seek meaning in what we do, and most people do want to do a good job. We value things like our relationships with coworkers. In some roles, we have strong relationships with customers, suppliers, partners, our boss. But so much has changed in the last few months. For many employees, jobs and income are not as secure as they were before the pandemic. There was uncertainty about the future. Will my company bounce back? Will my job change? Will I have job security again? There's just a lot of fear of the unknown as well as the known. And employees are missing a lot of the things that are meaningful to them. And so they have different needs during this time, additional needs. So as a human resources person, what I like to do is talk to people and get out and just find out what's going on with people. So I decided to be able to present some good information to you about what employees need. I spoke with a young working couple this past week to hear from them firsthand about what they're experiencing and what they find that they need during this time. The young man is working in his office 5 days a week because some of the staff needed to be there physically. The young woman, on the other hand, is a teacher working totally from home using online learning systems. So starting with the young man, I said, what do you need? What do you find you need during this time? And he said, well, first of all, I needed to know that my employer has a plan for such a situation like this, what their protocols are going to be, so I kind of know what to expect. Second, I need to know that my employer does care about my well-being and is in fact providing me with some kind of protective measures. So for example, they moved the workspaces apart to create social distance. If someone reported feeling ill at all with anything, they closed the office, sent everyone home, and had a contractor come in and do some deep cleaning. Third, he said, I need to stay informed. I need to be informed about the company, the state of the company, how we're doing, how our business is doing, to be able to have some kind of sense of my ongoing job security. Fourth, I need to be allowed some flexibility, especially during a time like this, to be able to take care of sick relatives, to help kids with homework if need be, and to help take care of household responsibilities, but no repercussions if I have to miss work. This is a different time. And finally, just to know I'm appreciated, especially during a time like this, for being adaptable, to being available as much as possible under these conditions. And those are the kinds of things that I usually need, but especially those kinds of things now at a time like this. So the young woman, who's the teacher, had really very much the same needs, but in addition, because she was working from home, she also has some different needs. And many of us are working from home, so you can probably relate to this. One, especially as a teacher, is to have really good clarity on what was expected of her in working from home. They had done some online learning before, but nothing to this degree every day and every moment. Second, to have the software and the equipment that's needed for online learning. So when her laptop gave out, the school was able to provide her with another one almost immediately. Three was also health and safety measures. So for example, when the teachers had to go in to retrieve things from their classrooms, they staggered the times to enter the building so people didn't have to be together. And especially for a school, the need for community and connection. We all have that. But for this particular need, there were particular Zoom teacher sessions as well as Google Classroom sessions with the students so they could all stay connected to one another. And finally, this was true with the man also, was humor. You know, the use of humor to be able to reduce anxiety. And so, for example, the school, they had a crazy hair day where each of the staff members and students did something crazy with their hair, which wasn't hard to do given the fact that many hadn't had haircuts in quite a while. So it just made it more fun and created healing laughter. So to kind of sum up, what can we who are leaders and managers of people do to really recognize these needs and to meet these needs that our employees have? One is we need to stay informed, communicate frequently and with transparency. Two, we need to regularly ask employees what they need, whether they're working from home or coming into work. Three, we need to act with competence and empathy for what our employees are going through. Be flexible with them and do take concrete steps to protect them. Fourth, to help them make the transition back to whatever the new normal is after the pandemic subsides. Know that this is going to be a transition that's both disconcerting and unnerving. Also look for ways the company can do things for others, to serve others. Maybe that's repurposing some of their products, giving to others who are in need. For example, a small family-owned restaurant here in my city decided to become a community pantry and sell food to those who need groceries and couldn't get them at the store. And then finally, just to find ways for employees to connect with one another, whether that be web-based meetings or setting up ways for people to let each other know what they need and to help each other out. So those are the kinds of things that we need to pay attention to and find ways to do. This is the kind of leadership that I call inspired leadership that builds company unity, loyalty, and is person-centered. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jim. Those are really helpful comments, very practical, and nothing like hearing from the front lines of a couple of employees. So really appreciate that. Those of us in our audience, we want to encourage you to submit questions that you might have based on Jim's comments or based on Nick's or mine or our upcoming speaker, Jon Mundell. And Jon, we're looking forward to having you unpack for us some of the needs of customers and competitors.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, Jon, we can hear you great.
Okay.
Just be sure to put your video on.
All righty, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jon Mundell. I'm a president of a small environmental company in Indianapolis and part of the economy of community. And I've been asked to talk about the needs of customers and competitors, which is kind of an interesting combination of things to talk about, right? Because we often think about our customers during times like this. How are we going to get new work? How are we going to get paid for the work we do? But we don't often think of competitors, and oftentimes that can be situations that are very negative, with competitors during times like this because of the concerns. So first, I want to say a couple of things really about this idea of how we operate. As part of this style we like to think of as a style of relationship over profit. And for one thing, most of these relationships we've built over time with clients. And oftentimes we have clients that we've gone through a lot of difficult times with, and those difficult times build these relationships. And we're in the middle of one of those right now with COVID, where we're faced with difficult things. And this idea of dropping facades and becoming real, being the people we're supposed to be this is a good reminder. And it's also a reminder that our clients are real people too, right? If some of us have been communicating with our clients from home and find them at home, you find them in the same kind of situations that we're faced with kids running in the background or dressed casually or just not kind of the proper professional kind of image we're always trying to project. So this idea of remembering that they are a lot like us is something that that we try to look for at all times, especially now. And so, you know, if we're feeling isolated at work, they're probably feeling isolated at work. So this idea of, you know, how do we keep in communication with them? How do we update them on the kind of things we're trying to provide for them? And it may be as simple as things that I'll send out emails in the morning, kind of updating particular clients on how we're doing, if we're meeting schedules, if we've faced with different challenges on projects that they are associated with. And so really it's just that knowledge that they want to know what we want to know. And the more we can share with them, the good, the bad, I think the more comfortable they can become in knowing that we have their best interest in mind. So this idea of really trying to make ourselves one with them, in other words, putting ourselves in their shoes, is very important. And I think the second thing is also reminding them that we also have needs, because some of our concerns are financial right now, right? Are we going to get paid for our bills on time? And are we going to get work in the future? You know, can we count on that? So it's good. I had to remind some clients in the last couple of weeks of the fact that a few of our invoices hadn't been paid, and that's always a touchy thing, because you want to continue getting work from them, but at the same time you also want to make sure you're financially sound and all of that. So just kind of those reminders, general reminders that, hey, we'd like to hear from you about the payment of our services. And if you can do anything, we'd really appreciate it during this time. I think it shows a certain vulnerability as well, that they, you know, I'm not a big corporation. We are a corporation of about 20 people, so that so these things do impact our employees as well. So again, this idea of, you know, this relationship, this mutual relationship you build with your clients over time is so important. I often say that that in the last crisis we had in 2008, that we had put for many years kind of deposits of social capital into a bank account, you know, using the nickels, dimes, and pennies of good deeds each day with clients. And in difficult times like this, sometimes we need to be able to withdraw some of that capital, but it's there because you've had this kind of relationship you've built. People have seen you work under all kinds of circumstances. So I think there's a more willingness to kind of have this feeling of interdependence, of kind of mutual sharing of the difficulties. So anyway, that's a little bit on clients. What about competitors? Like I said, this time, many people think of competitors as, wow, good riddance. Maybe they'll fold while this crisis happens, and when we come out on the other side, we'll be in better shape. That's not the kind of attitude we like to foster, and kind of the kind of business lifestyle we're trying to project here at this webinar. So what is important here, again, is this idea that competitors, we often say competitors can be friends too, right? They help us be better at what we do. We learn a lot from our competitors. And so during this time now, you know, what kind of interaction can we have with competitors? I can tell you today, I just got an email from a competitor I had helped about 4 weeks ago. He needed some particular thing that was kind of embarrassing from a professional standpoint. And he asked me, because of this relationship we had, could I help him? And also probably not to make a big deal out of it, you know? And so I really tried to respect that. I stopped what I was going to do that day, and I attended to his need, and I spent maybe a couple of hours on a problem, and I sent it to him, and thinking, you know, this is what I should do, even though I had other work with clients to do that day. And anyway, today I received an email that said, hey, this problem had been resolved as a result of my work and help, and that he wants to have lunch with me as soon as we can have lunch at a restaurant together. That's a small thing, but it's kind of the thing that you build with people you work with professionally, and mutual respect that can really help. Because I can tell you there have been times where competitors have recommended us for work, that they couldn't do. They've even given us work that they couldn't do. So, during this kind of situation, should we view them? We should view them as part of this interdependent community we're part of, right? Where we share resources, equipment, and perhaps if any of us have to lay off employees, they may be the first place that our employees could either go to work for them or they could work for us. So that's kind of another viewpoint about how we look at competitors in times like this as well, so as people that make us better, that also that can be friends and develop relationships with. That's all I've got.
Hey, John, I love how your experiences really underscore the importance of that vulnerability and authenticity with both customers and competitors, and just the way that builds a sense of community, not just professionally, but just relationally, and really happy to hear that. So folks, be sure to write any questions you might have for Jon Mundell and send them in. We welcome them. And now we'd like to hear from Dr. Gallagher, who's written a great book that I'm sure he can tell us a bit about as he talks about the stakeholders being our community. So Jon, please take it away.
Thank you, John. And let me thank all of my colleagues that have preceded me in this panel. Thanks, John, for calling attention to the fact that I'm, I think, the only non-business owner on the panel. But I am a business college professor, and as John mentioned, I've been involved with the economy of communion and produced a book, but it was really a book produced by lots of people. But it had to do with the business practices of the economy of communion. And John has asked me to talk about, the needs of the community in terms of addressing needs of stakeholders. And the first thing I would like to say about that is, as Jon Hokama mentioned, if you're taking care of yourself, as Nick mentioned, if you are, focusing on the needs of your company from a CEO's perspective, as Jim Funk mentioned, if you're focused on the needs of your employees, and as Jon Mundell, if you're focused on needs of customers and competitors, you are in fact already focused on the needs of your community, because in fact, this is what makes up community: is our companies, our businesses, our employees, our competitors, our customers. Customers are not always local, but they still make up part of the community that we inhabit. So, but that doesn't mean that the needs in our community end there. There are always needs outside the boundaries of our circles. And one thing that we can say about the pandemic is that it makes those needs, I think, more visible. Because the pandemic exposes many of the vulnerabilities in our communities, whether that's people that are vulnerable, more vulnerable because they're threatened with job loss, or businesses that are threatened because of cash flow issues, other organizations that are affected by closures. It just really affects the fabric and the vibrancy of the entire community. And so there are certainly needs out there. And, one of the things I think that we can do as business owners is look for those, beyond the confines of our business, look for other needs where we can participate and become involved in meeting those needs. I think that's a really important point, that, we are much better at meeting others' needs if we are, in fact, walking side by side with them, walking arm in arm with them. So I don't think, we need to think about addressing needs on a large scale, although that's fine. But, meeting small needs where we're aware of those needs and where we know that we can make an impact, where we can become, again, involved and participate in the lives of other people in our community. We can also share our own needs. I think this is part and parcel of enriching our community. And it's important that we do this, that we reach out ourselves to other organizations, other institutions, more importantly, other people in our community, where we can sort of walk through this together. So I don't have any context, any story that I can tell you about my business, but I can tell you about my institution, my college. And I'd just like to share some things about the way that my college has responded during this time. First of all, we're a small college. We're a Christian school, a Presbyterian school. We have been shut down since March 13th. That was when our spring break began, and almost all students left campus, and they have never come back. We shifted to totally to an online, distance formatted education starting at the end of March, and we are just about to wrap that up next week, try to end the semester next week. But during this time that we've been shut down, there's two things that I can say that our institution, as an institution, has stepped up, the college as an institution. One is a really simple thing that I know has been done in many places around the country, and that is we have 3D printers in our science labs. And so we have been able to repurpose those printers to manufacture such things as plastic face shields for our healthcare workers. The college is sort of right across the street. It's actually right across a very busy highway from the community hospital. And so we have been, we've had a good partnership with that hospital for a lot of years. But one of the things we were able to do, again, as an institution, is to make two of our residence halls available to healthcare personnel at the hospital. So these would be doctors or nurses or other healthcare staff or even hospital staff or any hospital employee that's been involved in treating COVID-19 patients. This was a way to give them a home away from home where they could, after their shift, they could stay in our residence hall without worrying about contaminating their own home, their family home, or exposing their family members to risk. And the resident in the residence hall, we're able to provide them with a private room and a private bath. And this has been, I think, a tremendous help to a number of our healthcare workers. And then finally, I would say that even though I just said that all students left campus, it turns out that there was a residual group of students who, for many various reasons, had nowhere else to go. And so we made arrangements for all of those students to remain on campus in their residence hall room. And many of these students were international students. They couldn't, so here they are out of the country, out of their home country, away from their home, looking to try to finish their studies for the balance of the semester. And many of them had no way to get home. Air travel has been canceled. They are frantically working, for some way to try to get home once the semester ends. But we started what we called the Back Porch Project, our international house, a meeting place for these students, as a back porch. And many of us at the college, every day, we are bringing them what they need, whether that's food, whether that's supplies, whether that's toilet paper, whether that's cards and notes of encouragement. And it's just has created this sort of mini community where we know these students, we're in conversation with these students, we know the ways in which everybody is helping them. And it's really, they have now created their own Facebook group, and they are posting the kinds of things that are going on every day. And it's just really turned out to be a very, very positive, very, very affirming, and very, very authentic experience. But it brings me back to my main point that even, you know, ourselves, if our businesses have resources that we could put to use in the community, or if we can identify vulnerable people and find ways to reach out to meet their needs. I think if it's done locally and in a way where you can really participate in the solution, it becomes a very, very rich experience. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, John. I love your emphasis on really practical, locally based responses to our community and just paying attention to what the needs are out there and matching the capabilities of our organizations and our businesses. That's terrific. Thank you. Well, I'd like to turn this over now to Suzanne of Living City Magazine, and Suzanne will go ahead and share with different panelists the questions that you have. And there's still plenty of time for you to share your questions in the Q&A box below at the bottom of the application. So Suzanne, thank you, and look forward to responding to people's questions.
Yes, thank you, John. So first question came from Marianne, and it's about dealing with your customers. So under these circumstances, what could be offered to new customers? Or do you better only rely on your old customers in the relationship that you already built for years?
That's a good question, Suzanne. The most difficult thing right now is to think about going out and meeting someone new. You know, we're limited by all kinds of restrictions right now. You can't knock on their doors. You can't be in the same room. You can certainly try to contact them by email or Skype. In fact, I did have one Skype call with a new customer who had heard about us. And so you've got to continue, working on those relationships in order to move the business ahead. But they often say, you know, more work comes from your existing clients. And in a crisis, I would hope that making a focus on those existing clients is the most important thing. But yet at the same time, you're fielding new responses, new requests from new clients. And we've had a few of those as well. This week we had 2 calls. I'm the only one here at the office today. So I'm the trash person, I'm the phone answerer. And there were 2 new calls, but the quickest thing we could do is respond very quickly. One has work in 2 days that we have to respond to. So they're important, they're very important, but that was almost like manna from heaven that came in because I didn't expect that right now. But we should be looking at that, but we've been focusing on our existing clients.
Maybe I can add something to what John said, is that we had the first instinct as well to serve our customers in what they needed the most. So because we operate in risk management, we basically started to come up with offerings, free offerings for our customers to help them out on what is the risk associated with working from home. You know, there's a lot of probably cybersecurity issues related to that now that some people can impersonate to be a colleague, you know, and maybe ask for personal information or private information or trade secrets. And we saw a big uptick from our customers, and it led a lot of actually add-on business from our customer in ways we didn't anticipate. And we also decided to offer the same packages to prospects, because the sales team was telling us, like, nobody wants to hear from us. They don't want to be sold to. By being served with something useful that is topical right now, like, you know, what is the risk of working from home? What can I do to secure myself? Very welcome. And so I think I told the team, is like, this is not a time to sell new prospects for things they may not have money or for, but helping them out on where the need is the most, absolutely. And so they're making many new friends.
Thank you, Nick and John. Here is a question from Melissa to all panelists. How are you addressing your own strategy to keep building strong relationships with all your stakeholders? Are you able to make room to all of them?
I can answer one little part of that, and that is with the company I do some work with, a lot of work with, a consultancy named Consulus, global consultancy. We really understand that people have different needs at this point, and so how do we meet those needs in a way that doesn't burden them? So, for example, we have some free resources that they can tap into, a survey that they can take to help understand and help us understand what their needs are. A free hour of consulting, for example, for small businesses, whether they're a current client or even one who has not been a client before. So looking for those ways to meet them where they are. And as Nick said, don't look to, what can I sell this person, but how can I help this person?
Mm-hmm. And the question to how to support your, or how to communicate to the stakeholders, I found it very important to explain how we want to address this crisis. So, because my point was, I don't want to slash and burn and cut myself cost out of it. I want to out-innovate, out-create and outsell out of this crisis. And so, and we had to conceptualize, and I share the same presentation to the employees, to my management team, and to my investors. And I had to explain it, this is situational to us, but there was a phase one where we had to react and respond. In this case, stop hiring because we're on a very aggressive hiring path. There's a second phase where we need to redirect to new realities, basically these free packages for our customers to create goodwill and more stickiness in existing business, and goodwill with new customers with these free packages was a redirect of new reality. And third is, through these new packages, we are realizing that meeting those concrete needs is giving birth to a new set of products that were too theoretical before. Mm-hmm. Almost like this crisis forced us to think harder about how to meet the client's needs in better ways than ever before. And we see that those new products will be the way to accelerate opportunities in the future. And so very important that if you have a strategy to come out of this crisis, you communicate it clearly so that your employees, your investors, your partner, your spouse, whatever, all understand how you're trying to get out of this. And then I would say solidify your plan by also looking at your advisor and have them try to poke holes so you can strengthen your plan in the process as well. And so I found it very beneficial.
Thank you. That was already also answering a bit to another question about how this crisis changed strategies. So did it also change the process of decision-making or of innovation?
I think decision-making, it's improved decision-making because we've been more intent in communicating well. Even though we're all at different places, we've really tried to have that communication lines open. We've begun using software, Windows Team, to kind of talk all during the day. So it seems like we're doing more consulting and opening it up for more people's input. So for us, the strategy came out of the need to communicate better, and that the better communication led to more input.
Mm-hmm.
I would just like to say a word about crisis, the times of crisis. That it really also is an occasion for us, well, we have no choice, but in times of crisis, we become role models. And the way that we personally behave and react and respond and interact with other people really communicates an awful lot to our employees, our families, our colleagues, and our customers even, I imagine, as to what sort of a proper and appropriate affirming kind of response in any sort of crisis situation.
And with,
I agree. I feel, I think the right mindset is, which helps me a lot, is like, how can we make this crisis a defining moment? It's going to be a milestone in life for the better. And it can be at work, but even at home, you know, I have a teenage boy, he's a college kid, not a teenage boy, he's a college kid back at home with his own new habits and that I'm not used to anymore. Well, I can be probably the best parent ever, the most patient parent ever. And maybe it's biting my tongue and getting better at appreciating him for who he is. The crisis allowing that to happen is like, well, maybe that's a blessing, you know? And so many small examples in both personal and professional life, you know, to define what this crisis can, what we want to make it to be.
You know, to piggyback on that thought, Nick, I think we're so used to having the horizon of our attention be very tightly focused in. In public companies, of course, it's, you know, the quarterly results. And even in small businesses, I think there's a sense of, hey, there's an annual goal we're driving towards. But I think what's exciting to me is I'm hearing all of us, all of you, talk about how let's set the horizon out towards service and innovation and looking for creative ways to serve our current and prospective clients, customers, competitors, our community, and let the results take care of themselves. So I love that focus being much further out, and really the irony is the more we take care of ourselves, the more selfless we can become.
Thank you. There are two questions from Miguel. I try to summarize them a bit. One is that the coronavirus is often approached like a war, using war languages. But in the end, even if there will be no destruction of material assets or infrastructure, a lot of people will be out of work. Is there something, what can we do to solve these issues and keep a lot of businesses alive? And is there a platform that can help to share resources? What can be done to meet the needs and possible solutions?
You know, I would say this is one of the things that this group called the economy of communion was made for. We haven't talked much about what that is all about, but it really sprang out of the need to alleviate poverty and the lack of fair distribution of goods and resources around the world. And so I really think the platform we have is these developing networks of businesses that are committed to that kind of ideal at the local level and the global level. You know, everything's local, obviously, and so this idea of a business concerned with the community and with finding people's jobs and offering jobs and who operates not just for profit but for other people is an important platform. You know, one of the things we do locally here is we've taken some of the money we've usually generated and provided to the economy of communion and distributed it to the churches in the area. And that's allowed a certain amount of that support for people out of work, et cetera. We've also been paying our cleaning staff who've not been here for a month and a half ongoing. So the idea of the economy of communion is one that I think is an answer to that.
You know, and sometimes you can ask the question with a pandemic like this and all of the difficulties, what good can come from something like this? And, you know, one of the things I think we already see that will and should continue beyond, the hot time of the pandemic is the sharing and the unity and the more closeness that I think we have across the world than we had before. People are, as we say, we're all in this together. That's whether it's in our same neighborhood or in our same city, country, or the world. We're all in this together. And so you already see sharing of resources, whether that be personal protective equipment or masks or whatever, between countries, you know, not just, you know, within a city, but there's already a lot going on to say, how can I help others thrive and survive and do better, not just myself, but others. And so I think it's turned us to be more other-centered, other-focused, and that I think should and will continue beyond this time of the pandemic.
Yeah, maybe a couple of small experiences in our business. We opened up some training that we charge for professionals to academics and students for free. Again, these are billable usually. And we've seen a big uptick because we feel that we are in a domain that is innovative and there's a rarity of skills that come at a premium. And so it could be a great opportunity for these skills to be developed and, for these people to thrive as we come out of the crisis and join an industry that is actually still booming. And so small little drop, another experience, and I would say small gestures you see in the business continuously come. I had several employees come and say, if it comes to that, you can count on part of my salary to support, more jobs. So we don't have to do layoffs if it comes to that, and so those are, I think we're seeing also some positive responses from people, in our circles.
On that question of resources, we will be, at the conclusion of the time, we will be sending out links to some of the groups and some of the things that EOC is doing and some of the different platforms where people can continue to pursue this. Because as our panelists have said, this is a big part of what EOC exists for. And we'll also be highlighting a few of the books that New City Press has published that relate directly to the kind of this broad vision of business and how to model it after the economy of communion. And perhaps there'll be some Living City articles that we'll link to as well. So we will be following up and giving you all some ways to continue to engage with this.
Thank you. So here's one more question from David. Is it possible to approach this crisis searching for growth instead of survival?
Well, that's definitely how we are seeing it in our company. And we pose this challenge, like, again, we can just survive and go back to the normal, or let's find new and creative and better ideas that will make us thrive. And it started with a mindset first. And it's incredible the response you get from people if you offer them to be protagonists. And they will get creative ideas. And so as business owners, we don't have to be alone. If we're surrounded by good people that we hired, that have the heart in the right place, they want to make a difference too. And so oftentimes it's up to us to have them rise to to that challenge and be part of the solution. And it's incredible. We got so many good ideas, and we're already better as a business 1 month in after launching this challenge than we were before.
I don't think you have to search too far to find that we're going to be learning from this. It's going to come at you. We learn through this, through these difficult times, sometimes through the school of hard knocks too, but also this thought of both widening and deepening this idea that we have about relationships with all kinds of folks. We widen it because our world gets a lot bigger. We realize we are totally independent or totally interdependent on many more people than we even realized. And also it deepens this because we realize that, we're more than just worker bees. We are people, and we have to know one another in our daily lives. So those are two big fruits of this, and a lot of discovery happens through that.
I would say also at a global level, literally global, we're really seeing both those who are impacted most negatively from coronavirus. And so in a way, things that we may have not normally noticed in terms of people's needs, particular structural artifacts of our current economic system, ways that we could proactively begin building, I think, to where folks are most in need. To me, these are actually good things because the challenges have become clearer as a result of this pandemic. And so I think with that clarity, there's, as you gentlemen have talked about, there's the opportunity to be innovative and to look in surprising places for these new ideas for growth as individuals and as businesses.
So we at New City Press and Living City, we just really want to thank everyone for joining us, but especially for the panelists and for EOC to being such great partners in this. I think everybody, the comments we've been getting, all of us who participated really could feel that this was a really great moment to be together in communion together. And so we'll continue to share with you all, as I mentioned, in some follow-up emails, so you can continue to engage these ideas. And we will be letting you know of future webinars and things that we have planned. Be sure to come to our Facebook page at New City Press and Living City, where there's all sorts of opportunities where you can directly share some things about how you're continuing to dare to care. But for now, we will leave it at that. And thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for everyone from around the world who joined us. Looks like we had quite a few.
That's right.
Nice to see everybody. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you again. Really appreciate
you.
this.
Take care.
Take care.
You too. Thanks, Greg.